This is Husbandhood, a collaboration of husbands addressing the lessons of singleness, fatherhood, and marriage.
Since Christ is central to success in every area of life, we will offer biblical perspectives when navigating these topics. So, without further ado,
What up? We
what's
are back.
good,
Man,
husbandhood?
tell you,
Yeah,
man.
man, it feels good to be back at it.
Yeah.
It's been way too long, so
Wait, man.
yeah, we're not gonna take too much time getting into things. We're gonna jump right in. If you guys have been following us for a while, we like to kick things off with a little bit of barbershop talk, our
You
shop
know it.
talk topic. And this one is gonna be fun, I think,
Uh-oh.
because the other day we were in our small group, and it's officially, I guess, it's fall, and so we
Yeah.
just thinking about the holiday season, and so we were like, sweet potato pie or pumpkin pie.
Oh
I
gosh.
tell you, man, it
Oh
turned
gosh.
into a thing. Like people were taking sides. I felt like we were about to have like
Mm.
a reenactment. So,
Ooh.
so are you on the sweet potato
Ooh.
pie bandwagon? Are you on the pumpkin pie bandwagon? Are you like, why are those even my options? I have something better.
Well, it's actually kind of funny that you brought both of those up because I actually don't like neither one of them.
Oh, you're one of them.
Yeah, I
Okay,
don't like either
okay,
one of them.
okay.
But
So
I
do
I
you
do
like
like the topic
pies?
because I
Okay,
have to if I
okay,
had to
okay,
pick one of them, I have to see because I'm thinking honestly, it'd be probably sweet potato pie.
okay.
I know I think sweet potato pie doesn't have that much allspice in there if I'm not mistaken, because I know pumpkin pie does, but I don't know,
It
but
doesn't.
man, both oh, it doesn't? No?
So, no, it doesn't have
Okay.
mouse. At least the way I make it. I'm just
Oh, okay.
kidding.
Yeah, it's
So,
it's
so
it's weird
okay.
though.
So if you're neither, because that's why I didn't cheer, because I'm a sweet potato pie person. I
Okay.
I grew up in the South. I
Alright.
never even had pumpkin pie until, looks like we got an escapee.
Oh,
I never even had pumpkin pie until like recently. And so you're
okay.
not sleepy. So
Of course not.
yeah, so I never even had pumpkin pie
Yeah.
until like recently, and I was
Mhm.
like, man, this bland. Like, where's
Yeah,
my
I
where's
don't
my flavor? Where's my but apparently it's a thing. People
yeah.
really enjoy it. So yeah. So if
I just
not
don't
sweet
like
potato
pumpkin
pie,
at all. I
yeah,
don't really
I'm
like
just not a
pumpkin.
fan of pumpkin. So,
Yeah.
but so if not those two, what do you like pie at all? Like,
If I had to pick one, it would definitely be apple pie.
oh
Um,
no.
it's pretty simple one. I mean, honestly, I don't eat as many desserts when it comes to that. I think my childhood has scarred me by just consuming so much. But my
Okay.
favorite dessert in that kind of area or realm would be the closest thing would be probably like a cobbler, like a peach cobbler, which I
Okay.
know they don't really. That's more of like I think a summer or even kind of a spring thing. But that's kind of my area. Like I don't really prefer any kind of pies for the most part, And I think if you really want to ask a question and really get down to the nitty-gritty, you should bring up cakes or pies because
Oh, yeah,
that's kinda where it's at. Because I prefer a cake over a pie any day. So
interesting. It for me, well, I'm not like a humongous sweet person to begin
mhm,
with, so, like, most of the time, I don't find myself craving sweets,
yeah.
but it's I don't know, man. I think for me, pies would edge cakes out just slightly,
Okay, okay.
but it depends for me because whenever I go to people's birthday party, I usually pass up the cake.
Yeah,
I usually don't have the cake, yeah, or maybe like 25% of the time I'll take the cake, or
yeah.
usually my wife is like, get a cake and we can share it. And then she ends up eating most of it. So
Yeah,
yeah, but I don't mind cakes, but I'm also like, it depends on the type of cake too.
true,
So
true.
we won't get into that because I don't want
We
people,
know we know one of our friends like cheesecake, but that's a topic for
oh
another
yeah, yeah, yeah.
another
We,
time.
we're not gonna put anybody on blast like that. So we'll keep it
Oh,
cordial.
oh, man. So
So Daryl, man, this, people might see the topic, and maybe they might
mhm.
put it together based on that. I title it, "Is it okay to call it quits?" So what are we discussing this week, man?
So something that's actually been kind of, I wouldn't say heavy on my heart, but I definitely believe it's something that I have paid more attention to. Actually, if you look at the media or even in the news, you're starting to see more and more of these couples that have either been together a long time or, or have like really strong, like, oh, we're never going, this is never going to happen to us because you have a strong foundation. And then you see this happen and it kind of makes you question like, what's really going on? And so what I'm talking about is this it's almost to me for like a cuss word, but it's called divorce. It's so toxic. It's such a toxic word. It's actually pretty funny because I remember a pastor saying to me one time, like when a couple or even I'm sorry, when in a relationship, if a married couple yell or says divorce, it's almost like a I don't know, what's the word I want to use? I want to say it's almost like a cancer where it comes in and it just tends to kind of take over. And it made me think more and more like, what is there a reason to get a divorce? Is every reason to get a divorce, or better yet, what does God say about getting divorced? And so that's something that I just really wanted to talk about. And it's funny because you've heard all these different topics about divorce rate. It's over 50 something percent. Do Christians get more divorce or equal divorce to non-Christians? Does the list can probably go on and on and on about different things. I've even heard people say like, oh man, me and my girl been married or not married, we've been together for 14, 15, 20 plus years, and I don't want to get married. I know if I get married, we're gonna get divorced. And I'm like, man, that's such an interesting mindset this day and age where um divorce is almost just a common thing now. Like it's like, oh, you get married to get divorced. And I've heard so many different things. And I just wanted to talk about it, break it down, and even just try to share just some of even my topics because I have gone through a divorce myself. And so, and just to see what other people are thinking and as well see what you're thinking, Todd. So
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you said you kind of look at it as you know a bit of a curse word, but for other people, I feel like it's just they just kind of see it as like, hey, it is what it is. Like
mm,
if I wake up and I don't like the way you look, divorce. It's
yeah.
almost like it's for some people, it's not even seen as y'all see my little
It's actually pretty funny.
cameo here. Yeah, some people just are like, hey, it's just it is what it is, right? And
Mhm,
so for me, I remember when early on when we were having the when I was talking to my now wife, we just sat down and we went through that whole process of like, is this even like if we're gonna do this, it, where do we both stand? And
mhm.
even going through like premarital counseling or at least like the premarital classes, and both of our answers was it's not an option, right?
Yeah.
And I think when you have that mentality that hey, I'm in it for like the duration. I'm here to persevere through that. You're a lot more capable of weathering like the highs and lows because I think anyone who's been married for any decent amount of time has had those moments where it pops in your head, right? The thought, and
Mhm.
if it hasn't, hey, good
Credit
good
to
good on
you.
you. But yeah, I was like, you're a better person than me. But certainly there are moments where it's like, man, could I? But then,
Mhm,
I go back on, and we'll talk about this too, what God expects of us, what,
mhm,
the standard is. And I'm like, no, like
mhm.
I'm gonna have to figure this out. We're gonna work through it because yeah, I stand
Yeah,
on what we decide on.
yeah.
But yeah, it is really disappointing and disconcerting to see just how often it's just like boom, people are just willing to. I had a friend who wasn't even married a year. Like,
Mm, wow.
before the first anniversary, she
Yeah.
was like,
Oh,
"I'm
before
done."
the first anniversary,
Before
wow.
the first anniversary, she was like, "I'm
Mhm,
done." So I'd gone to his wedding and,
mhm,
checking in with him, he's like, "Man,
mhm.
she's done." And I'm like, and she's not even willing to even try. I'm like,
Wow. Out of
"Wow."
curiosity, how long were they together before they got married?
I don't think it was very long,
Okay.
to my knowledge, because I
Mhm,
remember he and I kind of like we used to work together. We went our separate ways for like a little bit, and then
mhm,
he had been dating her. So yeah, I don't think it was like, it certainly wasn't like years and years prior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, still,
Wow.
it was a shocker.
Yeah, that it yeah. Well, whew, man, it's interesting because like I stated earlier, I was married. Actually, I was married for 16 years.
Mm.
The first time, and that's to me that's I mean,
That's
16
that's
years. I mean, that's a long time, right?
yeah.
And the crazy part about it is I didn't even want a divorce, you
Yeah.
know. As my hand began to get forced more and more with getting a divorce. I mean, my ex-wife, there was infidelity. My ex-wife was cheating on me, and even through that, we went through the whole counseling and even just kind of that restoration and stuff like that. But unfortunately, at that moment, kind of like the young lady you were talking about, I mean, she really had no interest in changing. And
Mhm.
also as she walked further and further down, we trying to walk further and further down this just kind of like rekindling our relationship. Some of the relationship she had already built with other men was obviously stronger at that time than, rekindling the relationship with me. And so it was just, time. And the saddened part was we had 3 girls already at that time, and they were, I think a couple of them were teenagers and one was still, a young girl. And I mean, it was very, very difficult for everybody, I believe. You know, um, I just it just saddens me because a lot of times when you hear about people getting divorced, and it's always, it's the adults that are not getting along, but we don't even think about like the children and stuff that are involved, or even some of the other stuff, like even, now, my daughters are having to split everything all the time, and it sucks. It really does suck. Now, granted, I mean, this is where this whole conversation that we're talking about is coming up, because it's like, okay, so then what does God say about divorce? Me and
No
you are
doubt.
both me and you are both believers. I know there's other people that listen to this podcast. I know that you may be a believer, you may not be a believer, but it's good to know so that you can understand not what the world's telling you, because a lot of times we hear what the world tells you, it'll leave in and out or push different objectives to you. But when we talk about it, you can have an understanding of where our biblical backgrounds are, and also where we understand moving forward, because now I'm married again. So, and that statistically speaking, it states that we should be getting divorced again because it's higher. But what we and my wife believe in right now, it's the same thing, you Todd and your wife believe in, is that divorce is not an option. It's not an
Yeah.
option. And so one of the things I wanted to bring up to you, it's when I'm like looking around, like I have my Bible around, like where's my Bible at? Is a lot of people go, well, God developed, God made divorce or whatnot. It's okay. And it's funny because that's where the scripture comes in, Matthew 19, I think it's verse 7 through 8. It's funny, like I said, I think, and I can see it still right here.
Right. Yeah. Just
I don't know if people
speak
I don't
with
know if people do that
certainty.
in podcasts, but
Speak with
just for you
certainty.
guys that are there looking, just for the verse, or even some of you guys who probably don't, own a Bible, or you just kind of curious. But yeah, Matthew 19, chapter 19, verse 7 to 8. This is where I believe it's the Pharisees. They're trying to ask God or Jesus about, what about, divorce? Like, what if, you don't like your woman, blah, 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 this and that. And so Jesus comes up and, he's saying, why then, they ask, did Moses command that a man gives his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? And so it's kind of funny. I like what you said earlier, Tom, when you're like, you wake up and you're like, no, I don't really like her anymore. I'm just going to send her away. I was like, huh, I wonder, is he reading some of the notes? But verse 8, then he goes, Jesus replies, Moses permitted you to divorce your wife because your hearts were hard, but this was not the way, or this way from the beginning. And so it kind of gets you thinking, because if you read the whole, because some people like to read some of that scripture and go, well, see,
Mhm.
Moses did it, so that's it. But you have to read the part, it was not this way from the beginning. And this is Jesus speaking. And so you understand that from God's perspective, he's never wanted divorce. You see what I'm saying? But because of our hearts couldn't be what's it called, malleable, or our hearts couldn't be forgiving, or our hearts, just, well, I mean, our hearts in general, can be deceitful. He,
Mhm.
he said Moses permitted you to divorce. And so when I look at this being a believer, It was not this way from the beginning. It makes me think like, okay, you know what? God's never really liked it, you know? Granted, he is merciful, and granted, he gives us grace that he gave Moses the permission to allow us to divorce us, right? But that's not what he wants. He doesn't want that at all.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because, when I read that in my new marriage now, because in my old marriage, it was just kind of like, I mean, I don't get me wrong, like I said, I tried, but I wasn't really what's the word I'm looking for? I wasn't really strong in my faith, I guess that'd be a word to say, or maybe I didn't have an understanding of different things. But now reading this, I have a better understanding and a better backing of like, hey, you know what? It's not something God wanted, and I don't, and I want what God wants. And
Right.
so that was one of the things that really spoke to me moving forward. And so, Todd, I'm kind of curious of what you think about, just kind of in general what I was speaking about, or maybe you have your own thoughts as well.
Well, I mean, like you said, especially with that verse, it's one of those things where um, I completely believe that there's a way that things ought to be, and then there are ways that we make it due to our stubbornness, due to, like you said, the hardness of our hearts and things like that. But I I always go back to this, right? Because again, just highlighting the fact that I know not everybody who listens to us may be believers, but
Mhm.
in my experience and what I've read and all those things, God's ways are always better than our ways, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so, yes, he allows for that provision of divorce because we'll do what we want to do. But the fact of the matter is divorce is yeah, I can't think of any instance where divorce is a good thing. You
Mhm.
know, it talks about in marriage to become one flesh. So if
Yeah.
you become one, divorce is essentially ripping apart something that has been like forged together. And
Yeah.
so that's why most of the time, I haven't met a happy divorcee yet.
Yeah.
Maybe they've adjusted over time,
Yeah.
but maybe one person's happy, but usually there at least one person in that exchange who is torn apart, and usually it's both.
Yeah.
And even the person who might be thinking that there's some conflict there, right? And
Mhm.
so I think it's because divorce in and of itself is not, and it's unnatural.
Yeah.
you
Not in
know
the plan.
yeah, it's not in the plan, it's
Mhm.
unnatural, and like you said, and like a lot of people are like, well, we don't have kids, they try to use that as an excuse. It's like, the fact of the matter is if you are
Mhm.
in a true genuine marriage, there is, like, you're already a family, you are now
Yeah.
one. The
Mhm.
children are just an extension of that family that you've already
Yeah.
forged. So yes, think about, like, some people are like, well, you there's so many excuses that people throw out there. It's
It's
just
a
like,
lot. It is a
if we
lot.
tried to talk about every, but the one that really gets me is where people are like, well, you just want someone to be unhappy and just stay just to, and it's like, no, I want you to be an adult
Mhm.
and learn how to love the person that you said you would love,
Yeah.
for for good or for ill, for sickness and
Yeah.
health. Like, I mean, hello, most of us go to a job that we don't necessarily want, and we make that work.
And
So
some
how
people
come?
perform well, right? They'll
Yeah,
perform
yeah,
well on jobs they don't
yeah,
like. Mhm.
exactly. So how
Mhm.
come you can't work hard at this?
Yeah.
Why are you just going to give up? And so that's really what's frustrating to me, because we have this very much self-centered, at least here in the
Mhm.
West, is very self-centered, very
Yeah.
much like, and we can get into some of the other things like infidelity,
Mhm.
abuse, some of those things, but
Yeah.
most of the time, we might talk. I think we're going to talk about this later. I don't believe that that is the main reason why people just up and
Yeah.
quit,
Yeah.
in that way. And so, forget the excuses. You
Mhm.
know, make make it work. Put in the work. And if you find yourself where you haven't been putting, you can always make a choice to change. And that's my
Yeah.
thing, is like, I feel like so many times people just want to give up before they even have really, like, and that's why I talk about perseverance. I feel like perseverance
Yeah.
matters in so many areas of our lives. And yet in one of the most important things of our lives, which is our family, our marriage, a lot of times people just don't want to persevere. They don't want to put in the work. So
Yeah.
really sad to me.
Yeah, it's funny because you like a lot of the things you said. I was like looking at some of the scriptures that we had, and I was like, man, you hitting on so many points. It's just like crazy, little tidbits, and it's interesting to me because it's like how some people like to go up to people like, oh, what was the secret to marriage, or what was this, and what was that, and so on and so on. And I just think it's interesting because when you look at these scriptures and you look at just even some of the marriages that are on some firm foundations, you can see how they literally had to take themselves out of it. you know they have to take themselves out of it, because if you leave yourself into anything, that's where that scripture we brought up where it says your hearts were hardened. If we had to think about, well, what was hardening their hearts, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was pride. I'm pretty sure it was pride. I'm pretty sure it was the whole, well, I feel like I deserve better. I feel like, this ain't what I wanted. It's always what, it's focusing on you. But it's interesting because when you think about when people get married, it's you, right? You changed me. You did this, you did that. And, but then the you start to sound a little bit different where it's like, you're not making me happy. You're not making it,
Mhm,
but that's not the same use that you had earlier. And that's just one of the things that, has always bothered me in marriage. Cause like you said, perseverance, and then even just being an adult, there are so many seasons. I mean, we have 4 seasons in this world. And just like in relationships, you go through different seasons. You go through seasons where everything's going great and perfect. Usually that's pretty much like the honeymoon season. I think that's the season everybody start off at. Everything's just
springtime.
perfect. Yeah, spring or whichever your favorite, whatever's your favorite season, that's the one you start off with. And then the one you don't like the most, that's the one you usually, you find yourself in. But again, these are just seasons. And so one of the things I think about, and I'm kind of jumping around here, it's just one of the things about uh um how we are to look at marriage. And I like bringing this scripture up because it's funny because as men, I know there's certain parts of it that we think about, like, what does that mean? Because that sounds pretty good. But it's that Hebrews 13:4, I think, yeah, chapter 13 verse 4. And so just for you guys right there, I mean, I'm just gonna let y'all know, it's to me, I actually there. Well, I'll tell you what part I like. It's kind of, I think you know what. But anyways, it says, "Let your marriage be held in honor." And so just that part right there, let your marriage be held in honor. One of the things I think about that sentence, and that's not what I was talking about, but one of those things I think about that part right there, when you break it down on that part in honor, you think about like how things were back in the day. Remember when you had the king and queen or prince and the princesses, and how they walked around with their mate. There was this honor to it. And so it feels like now that when people get married, it's just, oh, this is just a thing to do. No, it said, let
Mhm,
your marriage be held in honor among all. Among all. See, that's the part that like you have to break down the scriptures and read it. Let your marriage be held in honor. And this is where I think for us men, this is where we should get happy. It said, let the marriage bed be undefiled. You see what I'm saying? Like that's another breakdown. I'm just saying, I mean, you're married. It's just one of the things. And me and my wife, we always crack this joke. This probably has nothing to do with the podcast, but he's like, it's better to burn than to burn, is what we say. But it basically, it's not scriptural, but what it says is basically it's better to get married than to burn, and basically, in hell to, doing things you're not supposed to do. But hey, why don't you just get married and hey, your bed's undefiled. You do what you want to do. You know what I'm saying? As long as obviously your wife permits it, whatever. It's adult cast. But and so for God will judge the sexual and immoral and adulterous. And so, I mean, my thing is that one of the things I always tell my wife is that I said I want people to look at our marriage and see God. Like that's what I want them to see. I don't want them to see us. I want us to see God. I want to see that the covenant that we made, that we're standing strong on it, on his foundation, so that people, when they start looking at marriage, they go, man, you know what? I wonder what they're doing, because I know that they've been through different seasons of life. Some of them, I want, even want people that I even want people who have walked alongside us to even know the situations that we've gone through and see how God has shown up in those seasons, because we all know the Instagrams, the TikToks, all the social medias, even sometimes when you call somebody, hey, how's everything going, man? It's going great. And be all actuality,
mhm,
things can be going rough. But I want to be able to be talking and show people like, hey, you know what? No, we're not doing good this time. But you know what? We're taking the necessary steps, because there is no end to this relationship. This relationship is going to start off, by us putting everything to the feet of God and working through it, but even also having the community of husband and wives that believe in the same thing. Because sometimes we fall into the traps where, oh, let me go talk to, one of my friends. He's been divorced 3 times. He doesn't have nobody right now. Guess what he's going to tell you? Get
Oh yeah,
divorced.
yeah.
Like, like,
Well, I mean that just ties into. I mean, we talked about it before. It's like the people that you allow to speak into your life, the
mhm,
people that you surround yourself with, that's going to impact you. If you don't think
yeah.
it is, you're sadly mistaken. I think about going back to the actual topic. I think I don't even remember. I think it was like some lady on TikTok or Instagram, but she had like all these videos where essentially it was just her like just ragging on her marriage, ragging on her
Oh
husband and
gosh.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. And but it was meant to be like kind of like, oh yeah. But people are like, do you even love your husband? Like it just
Mhm.
seems like, and she's like, no, it's just meant to like show like, that not everything's peachy. And I was like, yeah, but it really just seems like you enjoy just dumping on your
Mhm.
husband. And I think
Yeah.
we with going back to that scripture, the idea of being held in honor and the marriage bed being undefiled. Like I just
Mhm.
think about the idea that ultimately, um, the beauty of like having a marriage that is that meets that criteria
Mhm.
is that you are willing to focus on them.
Mhm.
And I think
Oh,
that
yeah, I like that.
one of the things that we deal with, especially in this day and age with the internet and stuff like that, is like pornography and stuff like that, and
Mm.
how it just inserts itself, real insidiously into your marriage. And certainly for me, it's something that I have to continually try to like battle against,
Yeah,
because
it's
it
everywhere.
truly, yeah, it's everywhere.
Mhm.
You could just be watching, a movie. You could just
Mhm.
watching something on YouTube, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay. Like it's
Yeah.
not necessarily pornographic, but it's like, okay, so
Trying to stimulate the mind to get you to think like that, and think in
yeah,
that
yeah.
realm or whatnot.
And,
Yeah.
and you have daughters. I have a son. Man, I can tell you right now, especially like the statistics that they say, like how early children are being exposed to this. And then I
Mhm.
think about, like even sometimes you put some like you turn on Netflix and sometimes they have
Mhm.
like the autoplay. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, whoa, 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 whoa,
Yeah.
because and it, makes me think sometimes it's like, okay, well, if I don't want my son seeing it, should I be seeing it? Like, yeah, I'm an adult. But, you know, going back to what I was talking about is you really have to, it takes work if you
Mhm.
want to have that marriage that like that people look at and they're like, wow, that is a
Mhm.
special marriage. It's not, perfect. Like I don't want people to be looking at, my wife and me and being and having a misconception like you were
Yeah.
saying earlier. I want even the people who know the things that we've been through, the struggles we've been through, the financial woes and things like that,
Mhm.
and still look and see, wow, but they're persevering. Their love for each other is like, just paramount. And
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy, right? Because a lot of, I'll tell this little story because it just it'll expose my misconception about a lot of things, but also it's like, so I remember we were at a restaurant, and it was we were in college. I want to say it might have been like my sophomore year,
Alright.
and we were all talking and stuff, and the conversation about like getting married and like having sex came up.
Mhm.
And those moments where you say something and it seems like everybody gets quiet right when you say
Right, you
something
say something,
pertinent.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that happened. So it wasn't like a nice restaurant. I mean, we're college students, but I was like, I said this, I was like, man, when I get married, I'll be having sex every single day or something like that. And like the restaurant, definitely the volume dropped. And so it definitely seemed like more people heard it than I really wanted to.
Yeah.
And then I'm married now, and I'm like, okay, wow, that was a bold statement.
Well,
And
also it ramped up for you guys fast. Woo.
yeah, so for those who are getting it every single day, props to
Mhm.
you. Especially if you have kids and you're still getting it every single day.
Yeah.
Tell me your secret. But like the thing is it's funny because I feel like now I find, I don't want to get too like, you know,
Mhm.
indelicate with my words, but I find myself desiring my wife even more now than even
Mhm.
at the beginning. And I mean, this is after having a kid, and anybody, most women, their bodies change and things like that after they have,
Mhm.
a kid, 2 kids, 3 kids. But I find myself desiring to be like her even more. And I think a lot of that is because I'm actively,
Mhm.
you know, uh, m- inclining my heart to her.
Yeah.
There's an
Yeah.
active part of that. So it's not just like, oh, because I think if you were fully just controlled by your emotions, your desires, quote unquote, things like that,
Mhm.
sh- we're fickle beings, man.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about sweet potato pie and pumpkin pie. Maybe next week I all of a sudden start liking pumpkin
Yeah.
pie more than sweet potato. So
Yeah.
we cannot be counted on to be
Mhm.
um, consistent
Mhm. Yeah.
in and out. We have to bend our wills, our desires, our hearts towards the
Mhm.
things that we know that should. And so I think that the beauty of, you know, following God and things like that is there is the actual like him, working within you to
Yeah.
make you more like him, but also too is you having that like your desires changing and you actually
Yeah.
having that will, you know, to choose that too. So it's like this beautiful you know, like it just comes together beautifully is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said already, because I mean, first and foremost, like everything's a choice, right?
Mhm.
Even listening to your heart, people always like, well, my heart told me that, this wasn't gonna work out, blah, blah, blah. Everything's a choice. Even the fact of getting a divorce is a choice.
Oh yeah.
And that's the thing that we all have to understand. And I like what you said earlier, is like literally positioning yourself, just to where are where you're desiring your wife more. Like that's your choice. You're like, hey, you know what? Because the it's like this. Here we go. Here's how I'm gonna say it. The world does its job very well of researching how to get you to turn from different things.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna say that again, because I don't think the world does lots of research to figure out how to get you to turn from or to different things. So if the world doesn't want you to be married, they're going to flood you with things so that you're not married. I mean, think about it, guys. I mean, like, if we really want to think about it, if everybody in this world was for marriages, there would be more things talking about marriages and becoming and staying married than there would be of, hey, you know what? Do you be happy? All these different
Mhm.
things, because they're speaking to the thing of, hey, you know what? You don't need this man. You don't need this woman. What you need is by yourself, so that you can grow and be the best image of yourself that you can be. And I think that's interesting because, even as men, we have to understand what is spoken from the very, very beginning. And the thing is that me and you both know that God hates divorce. He hates divorce. He
Yeah.
hates it. It's like, how it's funny, because we always like, you ever be like, man, I hate that TV show. Oh, wait, hate's a strong word. I dislike, this TV show. No, God said he hates divorce. Like he didn't even change it. He said, for I hate divorce. Oh, I guess I should put that on there. But no, Malachi 2, guys. And then I'm just gonna say that where the part right there basically is, for I hate divorce, says the Lord, and God, the God of Israel. You know, I mean, there's no other way to describe that. Like, how can you mistake that for anything else?
So
You know?
Daryl, I'm gonna push back on you, right?
All
Because
right.
I'm not sure who's gonna listen to this in the future,
Mhm.
but this comes up, and I don't know if we talked about it earlier on. I don't know if you're fully aware of this whole quote unquote community that they call like
Okay.
the red pill community. It's this idea, you've seen the Matrix, I'm sure, right? Like you can take
Yeah.
the blue
Take the blue
pill,
pill. Yeah.
go back, stay in the Matrix and like whatever, or you can take the red
Yeah.
pill and see where the rabbit hole truly leads. So the idea of the red pill is you're awakened, you're seeing the world as it really is, and a lot of
Mm,
that is ties into the 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 treatment of men when it comes to divorce courts, divorce law, how like
okay.
men, like some men, end up taking their lives because their lives just end up being ruined when it comes to
Mhm.
divorce.
Okay.
And so I want to be sensitive to that whole piece, right? Because I don't think it's, because that scripture talks about it's a cruelty to your wife, but this was also in a time
Mhm.
where men were the ones who really who could initiate divorce.
Yeah.
Now that's, I don't know what the like some people say the statistic is like
I think I have that
astronomical. Like
I think
what
I
is
have
like
that
I
over
think they
here.
said like 80% or something. I don't know how
Uh,
accurate that is. I mean, I think it's fairly accurate.
it's like
Go ahead.
70. Ooh, good
Or is it
question.
75%?
No, I think it's like 79. I think it's really
Okay,
close to
yeah,
what
that's
you
what
were
I say.
saying.
I think it's right around 80% of divorces are initiated by women,
Mhm.
and the divorce courts tend to put men through the
Mhm.
ringers. So I want to be
Yeah.
sensitive to that, but I also think there are some things that, well, one, as a man, do we run away from challenges, or do
Yeah.
we try to meet the challenges and try to, and again, wisely, right?
Yeah.
So what do you say to those men who say, "Hey, I've done the calculations. I see
Mhm.
80% divorce initiated by
Mhm.
women. Divorce courts are horrendous towards men. Why would I even step into that arena?" What do you say to those men?
Well, to add on to what you said earlier, Todd, about the men who take their lives and stuff like that. Like I completely understand that. Like I said, when I got divorced the first time, it was definitely a haymaker. So it really rocked my world. Like there was a lot of things that I was deciding, and to be even full transparency, and my daughters know this, and my current wife know this, is I was actually going to leave them to go to California. Like I was gone.
Mm,
I was like, I was getting divorced, having to start all over, move into, I had dreams of a house, blah, 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 this and that, and had to move into literally a 2-bedroom apartment, which I didn't know how I was going to afford. And like, well, I actually had to live with my parents to save up enough money to go move into an apartment. And then you're thinking about, not being able to see your kids year round and all, like, dude, it was rough. Like, it was rough. Like, I know I was on the edge of many different things in my life at that time. And so yeah, I definitely understand that feeling and that emotion and all that it entails. But I also tell men, like, this is where I think about discipleship. And as men, we don't really like other men pouring into us. We don't. Because what happens is I feel like there are some blind spots to us that we are not willing to look at that can impact our marriages more than we think. I give you something simple: sarcasm. I
mm,
think everybody has sarcasm. Like you can't go anywhere without hearing some sarcasm. You know what I'm saying? Like it's everywhere. But we don't really think about how much sarcasm can be detrimental to a relationship.
yeah,
Like, I mean, and usually it's always subtle. Like, I mean, it's so common and so normal now. Like, it could be something as simple as, maybe, your wife forget to do something like that. And you're like, oh man, you always forget, or, just those little subtle things. And what happens is, and the way I heard it, which was really funny, was if you think about like building a wall, you know, when you first build the wall, you're putting the bricks down, right? It's low. Can't nobody see it. You can step over it. You're building this kind of like, oh, okay, one comment here, you know what, you always do this, this, that. And so it builds a block. What ends up happening is as the block gets higher and higher, that's when you realize you're spending less time. You're not talking to each other, or your eyes, since you can't see her, your eyes are focused on other things now, to where eventually that block is put in there where it's like, okay, now that's the last straw. Now, to add on to that, now that has to deal with us, right? Us, blah, blah, blah. To deal with that, that's where I feel like when it comes to the opposite side, because like you said, I know it's definitely above 50% of women are the ones that initiate divorce. What I really want to know about that 51% is, or whatever, is what's the reason? Like, what's the root? Because I feel like nowadays you hear that percentage and it's like, oh, I don't know, he didn't do this, or this or that and stuff like that. But I want to know, like, what percentage of those where they actually tried. Because
yeah.
now divorce is too easy now. I mean,
Oh yeah,
you go down to the library, fill out a paperwork, get it signed, and you're done. You're divorced. Like you said, there. I mean, it happens so fast, and I really feel like back then it probably didn't even happen that quick. Like I think it took some time. Granted they say you had to sign a certificate, but I don't know how fast they were getting that certificate. That's something I have to do some research on. But even then, I know currently before you get divorced, you have to wait 90 days, 60 to 90 days, I believe, before you get divorced. And so so one of the things that I really want to speak to is that what foundation do you have in that marriage though?
Yeah.
Because I think that plays key because, I have, well, I don't want to disclose this person's name. I have an individual who his idea of a relationship is what they call baddies. I don't know. That's a new
Mm.
word. That's a new word today.
I'm
Sorry
not.
guys.
Yeah, I know of the word. I don't. I don't.
I
You
don't
know,
know the
I'm old
breakdown
now.
of it. I don't know the
I,
exact breakdown, but that's what they saw now. And I'm judging off the picture that I see. And I look
mhm.
at that and I'm like, and again, I'm not judging in the sense of like I know the person. I'm judging off of what I see. So I'm using it's almost like a cover of a book. You look at it first, and I know they say don't judge it by cover, but that kind of at one point determines whether you pick up the book and read the rest of it, because not all of us are reading books. But I had to ask that person. I was like, okay, so that's what you want, but you're telling me that's what you want to spend the rest of your life with?
Mhm.
Like, that's the stuff we have to think about. Like, I feel like if we as men really go into relationships understanding the accountability and the responsibility of getting married, I do feel like that percentage drops dramatically when women are taking the initiative of getting divorced,
Well, I
because I
think.
don't. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
I
no,
was
no.
gonna say. I think you have some information about that, right?
Oh, I got I got tons, I got tons of information. And actually, I'll probably put this on here just first is just, the reasons couples get divorced. Because that to me, and it's and we can touch on a few of those. Todd, I know you can see them as well if you wanted to click on any of them and talk about them. But these are some of the ones that I really wanted to talk about just for a few seconds or a few minutes. I know we can talk a lot, but I know we had, things to do or whatnot, beds to sleep in, but we need to there's a couple of things that I want to talk about, some of the reason why couples get divorced. And again, this is where I would really want to know, like, and granted, I have the percentages on a lot of these, they're not on here, but we can talk about them. uh but I want to speak to some of the stuff that I know I went through. I'll start off with some of the things that I went to, and then if Todd, if you wanted to talk about some of the things that you believe, because I'm pretty sure you've either known somebody or something that's happened. But I feel like in my instance, my first marriage, one of the biggest reasons, and it's one of the reasons that, or it's not one of the biggest reasons, but it's one of the reasons why it's on there, and this is probably gonna be a shocker to you, Todd, is this right here: marrying too young. Now, I was a huge, huge advocate about age doesn't matter, and I still am. I really am. But the thing is that again, it has to deal with the foundation. When me and my ex-wife got married, it was because, better yet, to say, it was more or less, it wasn't that we didn't care of each other. It was we were trying to get out of our parents' house, and we knew the only right way to do it was to move out and get married. Like
Mm.
that's what we knew. So there was no premarital class, there was no discipleship. It was just like, hey, you know what? The only way we can be live right is get out and just get married. And there was probably so many issues in that. And I feel like if you are young and you want to get married, just do the work. That's all I'm asking. Just do the work. Do the work, do the classes, do the, talking to other people, really get your feet wet or dirty for your partner. Let them know, like, hey, look, if we're gonna get married this young, let it be 20 to 25 or whatever it is. I'm hoping that's the earliest people get married, but really just asking yourself, like, hey, you know what, you know, are we prepared for this? What are we doing? What are our some of our morals? What are some of the things, like, where are our kids gonna go? Like, doing those things work. Like, hey, how influential, I think is the word, is your family going to be?
Yeah.
There's so many things we don't think about when you're young, because you're like, I'm in love, I just want to get married, blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, just do the work. That's all I'm saying, is just do the work, so that when you get married, some of the things that come up, and there are some topics that come up later on as you get, you're married, but really discuss those things or whatnot, so that as you get older, these are not things that are coming up where you're like, well, I never got to have a life because I was pregnant all the time. Well, you knew you wanted kids early, and just, like, those are those things that you really got to just discuss.
Yeah.
So.
I would probably amend that, and like I think you kind of touched on it, is you're unprepared. Like you
Mhm.
said, I would say that more so because I think, historically, people or at least, some people would be getting married fairly young,
Oh, that is true. I didn't
and,
even think
and
about that,
so
yeah.
yeah, so I think it's more so it's just again, I think it goes back to the idea of the wrong perspective on what
Mhm.
it takes to maintain a marriage,
Yeah.
like like I think, and that may be the danger of marrying young is, we all look. I know I looked much better than I do now when I was younger. I was a lot
I
more
was
fit.
definitely slimmer. I was
Yeah,
slimmer.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, think the hormones are really like churning and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
you might not be quite as level headed, clear minded when
Mhm.
you're younger. So you're just like, wow, you
Yeah.
know. I
Yeah.
see what I like, and so, but if you are prepared, if you have that, and I think again that goes back to what you're talking about, having people who are discipling you,
Mhm.
having that familial foundation. So
Mm.
because I think it's interesting, right? Because I was down on my parents, 'cause I'm like, man, they really don't know the type of girls I'm attracted to.
Yeah.
But then I think about it now, it's like, well, maybe they were thinking more so about the character of the woman
Um,
I should be attracted to, you know?
yeah.
And so that's the thing is like when you're younger, well, there's more of a likelihood when you're younger that it's this, like,
Yeah.
ooh, as
It's
opposed to really like evaluating the person as a whole. So yeah, I
yeah.
think it's just, yeah, if just being properly prepared, which
Mhm.
marrying younger can be a
Yeah.
potential like risk, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So
Any
I'm
any
curious,
other areas? Because I
I'm
mean, I
curious,
know you
which one
talk.
which one you wanna pick? There's so
I
many
don't
there.
want to pick any of them because now I'm kidding. I would say, because I've heard this, is that
Mhm.
finances is
Finances,
is
yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
major, um, things. And man, it's crazy because with the economy the way it is, I've been seeing a
Mhm.
lot of people talk about how, like, in the past you could support a family on a single income, and
Mhm.
now it's like you could barely make it by with a double income,
Yeah.
and you probably might not even be able to own a home.
Mhm.
And so I try not to operate from a place of fear, but reading some of that stuff, man, it's really daunting because
Mhm.
you know I I mean, my wife and I have had some conversations about finances, and so every time I see an Amazon package come through, I'm like, uh,
Oh,
are
the
we
Amazon packages.
where's the money coming from? And so it's just one of those things. But then she's like, well, why don't you go work somewhere? And I'm like, oh, okay, we gonna be throwing bonds back and forth like that. So, like the
That's how
finance the
we
finance
gonna
thing, like I've talked to so many people where,
Mhm.
yeah, it is a source of tension. And I
Mhm.
think so many times, instead of people being like, well, hey, what can we do to address the financial
Mhm.
situation? Someone might just be like, you know what? Well, if it was just me and my lonesome, I can make it work. So,
Mhm.
you can find your way out of this. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think the finances thing is definitely a place where people it can start that fracture.
Yeah. That is such a difficult topic, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, I don't even know where to begin, and I'm trying not to disclose a couple, but I'll say it like this. So I knew a couple that, they each kept everything separate, and they just kinda selected some of the bills as they got as they, were in their marriage of which ones they were gonna pay. Well,
Mhm.
as one of them lost their job and not getting paid as much, there still wasn't a talk about, like, who covers the rest. It was like, "Those are your bills."
Oh
And
man.
it's like and in my mind, I'm like, "Dude, that is a horrible idea." Because it's like because in your head, you're like, "Oh, okay, I know you used to have this job that made this, but you lost that job, so now you just need to find something to make it." And in your head, you're like, "Well, shouldn't you help as the wife?" Now, I know a lot of us can be like, "Well, I would never do that," but, I mean, you'd be surprised 'cause I mean, if you're taking care of your bills and you're like, "Hey, I'm good," you the one need to, handle your,
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I know there's no like biblical mandate to combine
Mhm.
your finances, but
Yeah.
I do find it interesting when I talk to people who do maintain separate like
Mhm.
finances and they're married
Yeah.
because I one, for me, I feel like it keeps me accountable. It keeps me
Mhm.
from doing some like, because the temptation could be there. It's like, oh, and
Yeah.
now she can't see what I'm spending my money on. So that's one area, but even just from to prevent something like that,
Yeah.
where you have that mentality about this is my money, this is your money, and
Mhm.
maybe someone hits tough times, or why isn't this taken care of? That was supposed to be your responsibility. Whereas
Yeah.
just having that mentality of like it's we're both
Yeah.
handling this, and maybe one person is in charge of paying the bills,
Yeah.
but still it's seen as like ultimately we're both responsible for this.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. And so again, I'm if I talk to someone and they're like, oh yeah, we maintain
Mhm.
our stuff separately, like I'm not gonna be like, trying to throw fire and
Yeah.
brimstone down on them, but I am gonna be like, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And I usually ask them to tell me how it works. Like, I'm like, "How do you
Yeah,
do that?" 'Cause it is a difficult situation because I know after hearing that story in my relationship, like, I just although it's open, I don't like divided things, because in my
yeah,
mind, I go, if we ever hit hard times, I wanna know that, "Hey, this is what we have," because it's very humbling no matter what it is, to have to come down and be like, "Hey, you know what? My check wasn't as big as I thought it was going to be. Can I help on this?" But when
yeah,
you're one team, one unit, and you're bringing all, everything into one house, and you're going, "Hey, here's what we got to do, and this is what's going to be spread out." You have a little bit more unity. I feel like there,
yeah, yeah,
and it's not this, and I'm not saying all relationships or marriages are like that, but then you don't have this kind of superiority feeling where it's like, well, I bring in all the money and you don't, I'm covering you half the time. Well, now you're breaking down the unity because of the fact that you're now having this split finance household where it's like I bring this much in, you bring this much in, and your much is not matching my much. And I've heard some crazy things
yeah,
online about how much money a man should bring in because I bring in this much, and I'm like, well, I mean that's crazy. And then anyways, I can go down that road forever, but
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to.
We'll have to have a whole nother topic
Yeah,
on that subject on
yeah.
that,
And
to
so I want to go through a couple of these really quickly because these are ones that unfortunately I have, or not for unfortunately, but I don't have much experience of knowing about it. Um, but I do want to take maybe a few minutes just talking about it, Todd, and seeing what your perspective is. And I'm pretty sure you're gonna be like, you put me on the spot on these right here. But
Okay, here we go.
but and I'm gonna just flash these really quick. But the first one is domestic violence.
Yeah, I mean, in that situation, my personal opinion on that is, I think that that is a reasonable. So let me, because I want to be careful. I think first and foremost, that is a reason to separate. You
Mhm,
know, I am a personal believer in there is potential for uh, that person to rehabilitate and
mhm,
there to be potential reconciliation. But I don't think whoever is the victim of domestic violence is obligated to one to stay in that situation.
mhm,
Like I definitely think, and if there's children, like everybody needs to be removed from that.
mhm,
But I do think that if there can be reconciliation, that would be great. But I don't think anyone who is a victim of domestic violence is has to reconcile. That's my
mhm.
perspective on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. All right, I have no comment on it. I'm just gonna let you see it. So the
Okay,
next
you're
one
just gonna,
is
yeah, put me on the spot like that.
is is
Addiction.
addictions.
I
Yeah.
think it depends on the type of addictions, but I don't, addictions are not healthy. I
Mhm,
do believe that that should be something that the other partner. So I think it's almost like a less. Again, it depends on the addiction, but I
mhm,
think it's if it's not a major addiction, there needs to be work in helping your partner,
mhm,
your spouse work through that. If it is a major addiction, I think at that point it can be perceived as like a domestic violence type situation
mm,
where
okay.
separation, try for rehabilitation, reconciliation, and if not, I think that
Yeah,
that could be legitimate grounds for divorce, depending
yeah,
on the type of addiction. So yeah.
yeah. And I will say to those 2, just kind of my little small piece is that, I really feel like if you're on that firm foundation, speaking to some of the believers and maybe people who are even, coming new to their faith, is that, in those moments, really and truly seeking that discipleship,
Mhm.
really seeking those couples or the pastors or even, just people that you can talk to about these things in a safe environment, and to be able to see if there's going to be progress and to see if there's going to be any like you said, are they going to be going to get the help? Because I think that's the biggest thing is for as a couple not to be solely trying to do it yourself, but really seeking that help if you're really trying to keep the marriage together. And
Yeah.
again, that goes for both men and women, really seeking that because, like I said, not addictions, that's everything, sexual addiction, obviously,
Yeah, that's why I
money,
said the type of it.
like, yeah. So, really seeking that help, if I feel like if both parties are really seeking to help, there could be some, reconciliation. But if there's not, then I think that's when you need to really sit down and talk about the next steps or whatnot.
Yeah.
Some of these other ones, are kind of interesting. I like to speak to some of those. I mean, first one I'm gonna speak to some that I obviously experienced already myself is, infidelity. That one sucks. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, uh, obviously the Lord does give you reasons to leave if there's infidelity in the household. Now, just to let you guys know, in my first marriage, I did not leave the house. I really tried to work it out. I actually, and this is not no boastful thing, I'm just letting you know, just so you have an understanding. But I actually did the couples counseling, group counseling, and then I actually led a counseling myself on trying to restore me and my ex-wife's marriage. And to be honest with you, I mean, that was not something that she really wanted to do in the end. I mean, I think she was trying to stay because of our daughters, but ultimately it was just not something that was going to happen. Again, this is kind of to me just like the other ones where it's like if you're seeking the help, if you have, cheated on your spouse or, have been cheated on, it's really that decision you want to make, um, to seek the help and see if that's something that you want to continue doing. Again, like I said, God does give you, it does say you can. I just didn't feel like, again, it's just kind of falling on that, like, till death do us part, thickness and thin, stuff like that. Like when you say those words, you got to ask yourself, what does that mean? Are there footnotes that saying unless this happen? Are you really digging in, going, hey, you know what? You made a mistake. You're telling me you're not going to do it. We're going to seek the help. We're going to work on this together, and we're going to see really and truly God move in this at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Um, Although I will say, like I said, if you have been cheated on, I know I have, it is definitely tough on both sides, even sometimes for the one who has cheated on, or the one has done the cheating. Sometimes we look at it only from the victim mentality. And I will say, like, if someone has made that mistake, and I get it, we could probably have a whole podcast. How did that mistake happen? Blah, 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 this and that. Trust me, I understand, Um, but what I'm saying is if someone's trying to genuinely make their relationship work, from something like this, it can be difficult on both sides, and you really have to dig in and try and see
Well,
what God.
and if I could add to that, because I have not experienced divorce, I have not experienced
Mhm.
infidelity, but I do have two people that I know personally
Mm,
very, very well who actually experienced infidelity in their
mm.
marriage, and they were able to reconcile,
Ooh,
and
okay.
now they have really healthy marriages. So
Wow.
I've seen, and I know some people might be like, that's ridiculous. Like
Mhm.
I'd have been out there, but like as believers, we I mean the bottom line is one of the foundational beliefs of Christianity is that God has forgiven us like for so much. And
Mm,
so how
I
can
like
we
that.
stand in judgment against someone who has really the wrong that they've done against us is minuscule based
Mhm.
and when you compare the wrong that we've done to God. And
Yeah.
so if God has forgiven us and blessed us, we would be so remiss to not give someone else that. So I'm not saying that you have to do that, because at that
Mhm.
point I believe, when infidelity um, happens, the covenant really has pretty much been broken, if not
Yeah.
damaged. But I do think that I know reconciliation can happen, and
Mhm.
I do think you should at least consider reconciling if you have been the one wronged. But again, I'm not going to lay that yoke upon people, but because I know some people might be like, "You cheat, that's it, I'm
That's
done."
it. Yeah, yeah.
But there can be beauty in
Mhm.
reconciling beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so here's some other ones, guys, in case y'all wanted to know just some of the reasons. One of them is lack of commitment, which always puzzled me when I heard that one because it's like, you got to think about what you did to meet that person, you know? Like I feel like, and I think this is one of those things that I always ask myself that it's like, you know, as men, I said, are we dating our wives, weekly, monthly, or however, times that you feel fit? Because, you got to think about the time you met each other, the commitment that you had. I know some of us maybe even like, driven hours to go see people, or maybe you're like, oh man, I'm giving her a rose every day until she dates me, that commitment level. And so when I hear lack of commitment is one of the reasons why people get divorced, I'm like, wow, like do you just stop trying? And I'm not, they're not judging or commending, but are condemning, but it's just like in my head, I'm like, I understand, but this is something you have to do daily. Like you
Yeah.
really have to commit to your wife daily, just like you go to your job daily, just like when people have children and they you can't sit there and wake up and go, I'm not going to feed you today. It's like, no, you committing to, like, you commit to all that stuff. And so to hear a lack of commitment, I'm just like, man, I feel like as men, we really have to make sure that we're doing what is necessary to or put like this, your wife should know every day that you love her. And
Yeah.
not only, obviously you need to say it, but not only through that, but through your actions, because you can be like, love you, but be committed to her. Like really, like let her know, like, she's the only one that you desire, and women, for you too. If there's any women listening to the podcast as well, like really letting your husband know, if he's one of them guys who likes to, be affirmed, you know what, babe, you do a great job for this family.
Which is pretty much every man. I'm not gonna say every, but it's every man.
Pretty sure it's 99.95.
Nine 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 nine
Yeah.
nine 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 nine.
Yeah, like really being committed. And so, I hear that and it saddens me because, you got to think about like, man, where is that lack of commitment coming from? And I get it. There's different, I would love if anybody wanted to even further comment on that and even share some of the things. I would love to hear about that because I just know now in my marriage, I'm learning, how much a lack of commitment can affect, but I also know like when you are committed, how much it does. And it just, that being committed just really inspires me because you see the difference in your wife when you're committed, when you're doing the things, when she's like, oh no, I got it. Like, no, I got it. These things, like just little things. And my wife doesn't cook a lot and I do. And so like when I talk to her, I try to make it seem like it's a fine dining experience. Like, oh babe, you know what I got you? I got you a filet and it was grass fed. And then I took the butter and and just letting her know that she's, wined and dined. And granted, it could be the only thing she ate was just the steak, but I'm just like, hey, I just want you to know I'm committed to making this a really good meal to you. So, cause you deserve that, just really, really pouring into her. But yeah, I would love to hear from just people where they feel like, a lack of commitment was one of the reasons why they may have gotten divorced or whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think we've hit it
Time.
out of the park with this. Yeah.
So Ty, I got a quick question for you. Out
Okay.
of the ones that we just said, which one do you think is the number one reason as of 2000 and let's see, we got 2003. Yeah, as of 2003, which one do you believe is the number one reason of divorce?
I mean, I'm going to just take a wild guess because I really don't know. I
Mhm.
have one that I think, but
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna go with lack of intimacy.
Ooh, I would say close, but no cigar.
Ah, okay.
Actually, I'm
Which
actually
one
kind of
was?
curious. So, how about? Let me hold on. Let me see.
Well, the one I was thinking was finances,
Finances.
but
All right.
it,
So finances was 36%. Don't get me wrong, it was high,
okay.
36%. But the one that was 75%, I believe,
Whoa.
75% of divorces were because of lack of commitment.
What?
Crazy, right?
I would love to. I want
That's
to see
why.
this. I want to see this study. I want to
Oh,
see this
I'll
study. I
definitely
want. I
send it
want to
to you.
know the
It's
methodology because
yeah.
like I hear this. I hear like men are afraid to commit. Blah
Mhm.
blah 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 blah. And I would always tell women, if you are with a man and you don't know if he likes you or if you don't know if he's willing to commit, he probably isn't. And the reason
Yeah.
why I say that, at least in my experience, when men typically want something, they will go after it.
Yeah.
In my experience, when I
Mhm.
was when I met my wife, I looked at her, we spent some time together, and I was like, yeah.
Mhm.
And so I pursued her in that way.
Yeah.
And so I was the first one to say I love you, all of those things. She wasn't even sure. But for me, I was ready
Mhm.
to go. Maybe I'm
Mhm.
an anomaly, But
Mhm.
I've spent time with plenty of men, and I've seen when men are motivated,
Mhm.
they don't tend to be wishy-washy. So I
Yeah.
think what women are experiencing, so again, I don't know the methodology, so I'm not gonna call it a question. When I hear this, men are afraid of commitment, I'm like, that means you are with or you're
Mhm.
pursuing or well,
Yeah.
you are with the wrong man, is
Yeah.
my opinion.
And again, that even though that study was for men and women, so I don't know
Yeah.
what the balance is of men versus women, but, yeah, it was very startling for me
Yeah, that's interesting. So
because go ahead.
yeah. Well, I was gonna say, what was the percentage for lack of intimacy?
Hold on. Sorry about that. I did not have one, so it must have been really, really low.
Oh,
So I can
hmm,
give you kind of the breakdown of what I had on here as far
okay.
as what was given. So too much conflict was 57%. And granted, this is like I forgot what the number is, as far as like how I got the numbers of it. Um, but 57% too much conflict. 23% was actually domestic violence, and then addiction was 34. And
Hmm.
so it's just an interesting. Matter of fact, I can let y'all know. It was a Forbes. I got off of Forbes advisor. I'm sorry, Ford advisor. Is done by a person named Christy Bieber, I guess.
Oh,
And they just basically,
Justin Bieber's? Okay.
and basically what it did, which is kind of interesting, and to kind of wrap it up, I know we were kind of over time. It was basically talking about how the amount of divorces and marriages have actually decreased. Because I know I told you earlier about that the number is not necessarily that high, but the thing is that it decreased because a lot of people are not getting married anymore.
Yeah, that's
And
really
so the
sad.
amount, yeah. And so that's the part that was interesting because once someone gets divorced, they were saying how the percentage increased. And so that was what people tend to stop getting divorced. But I mean, if you want to check it out, like I said, it was online, Forbes advisor. Basically, it was revealing divorce statistics in 2023. And it was about, I want to say probably like 10, 15 pages of
Mm,
just different things about it. And I'm not using this as a reason for people to like, oh, this is the reason why I'm getting divorced, but like just to kind of just know
yeah,
what's going on in the
reference.
world. Because even breaks it down by state, like which states have the most. And it's funny because where my wife is from, it was like not available. Hawaii had not available for the amount of divorces. I'm like, how do you? In my head, I was like, how could you get divorced in Hawaii? You in Hawaii? Like, what? What are you thinking about? No, I'm just kidding. But I don't know. But I did find out one of the countries that has the lowest divorce rate was the Philippines.
The
You know which one
Filipinos,
had the
man.
highest? Maldives.
Ah,
Crazy, right?
that is crazy.
So.
Interesting, interesting. Well,
But-
Daryl, definitely. I don't know if I can say I enjoyed it because we were talking about a very heavy topic, but
Yeah,
definitely just glad we hit on this. I hope that this has been encouraging and informative for everybody.
yeah.
But bottom line is for those, if you happen to watch this episode or any episode and you find yourself in a situation where maybe you're considering divorce or maybe you're going through divorce, we would definitely just want to
Mhm.
do our best to walk with you through that, help you through that, and hopefully you can be one of those success stories that you
Mhm.
you're able to reconcile because
Yeah.
I think that that's a very beautiful picture of forgiveness. So,
Mhm.
you got anything else before we wrap
Yeah,
up?
no, no, not at all. Just to reiterate, yeah, definitely reach out, guys. I know we ourselves don't have resources, but we can definitely try to connect you with something that can help you out, guys. If it's something that you're going through, that you are seeking, just like you said, reconciliation or even just some advice, definitely reach out to us, guys. And so, we'll check y'all out later on next time. We had a great time. And Todd, I look forward to seeing you to our next topic. So
Yeah, man, definitely. And as this pop up, just make sure give us a like, subscribe if you find us valuable,
you
and
know it.
we'll catch you guys next time.
All right. See you later, Todd. Peace.
Bye.